Well, this was not what I was expecting to do today. And I have spoken at Unity and at other churches, and when I do give a talk, I usually write it and make certain I finish the talk 2 weeks ahead of time so I can think about it. I can be totally prepared. Sometimes I will have a complete script, and I haven't done any of that.
Yay!
In fact, I realized that for this point in time, that is the most appropriate thing.
Yes.
Because today, what we need is a talk from the heart, and that is all I have to give you. I am not a spiritual teacher. I am not a minister. I don't even know if I'm halfway wise. And all of my friends who are sitting in the audience can go, oh yeah. But I am a poet. And part of the duty of a poet is to speak their own experience as clearly, as effectively as they can, to convey the emotion, to convey the lived experience. And so that's what I'm going to attempt to do today. Convey some of my experience with poetry. I have a few quotes from a few other people. I haven't done no preparation. But also attempt to talk from my heart about why prayer is more important now than ever before. Now, you all might think that's odd, or at least some people who know me, because I am one of the self-proclaimed atheists in this church. I do not believe in a conventional version of God. To me, God is not a big dude. I mean, I grew up thinking God was a big dude with a toga sitting on a bench, which I now realize is a vision of Zeus. If I believe in any kind of God, it's something you can't name, something you can't touch. I find the word God gets in my way. If I'm going to talk about God, it's about the divine, because that's something that I don't have all these definitions attached to. So I pray, and I don't usually mention God, because it helps me. But I want to talk about that kind of prayer today, what I call transformational prayer, a version of affirmative prayer, which is what we talk about in Unity. But first, I'm going to tell you a story. Some of you know this. Some of you lived it with me. Some of you heard this story. And for some of you, it'll be new. This is a story about me and my mother. As some of you know, my mother lived with me for the last 10 years of her life. She died in 2014. She moved in 2004. She moved in when she was 77 years old. She died when she was 87. When she moved in, we had some mother-daughter issues. Well, many mother-daughter issues. But one of the things that helped is I lived at that time in a big Victorian house. She had the downstairs, I had the upstairs. And we met in the kitchen. We had fun around some of our arguments, but we did have fun. I learned things about my family I never knew before, things in midnight conversations that I would never have heard. I wouldn't have known that my grandparents in the Depression had to send her 2 sisters away to live with relatives because they were too poor to take care of all 3 kids. I never would have known that if she hadn't lived with me. We went out and we tried every new restaurant that opened in Lawrence, and as you know, that's many. Some of them, we got there the week they opened, and then they were gone the next week. But it was an adventure. We did many things. I enjoyed her company. She was a joy to be with. She was also, as most of you know, or some of you know, a painter. She was mostly a landscape painter, and she took what had been my old living room downstairs and made it into a studio. And painted all the time. My house smelled of oil paints and turpentine. And then as time went on, things got harder for her. She struggled. She began to have what we learned later were transient ischemic attacks. These are mini strokes that kind of eat away at you a little bit at a time. And then she would seem to recover and it would all be fine. And we would go on our merry way. And then she'd have another one, and we wouldn't even know that some of these had happened. And she got frailer and frailer and frankly weirder. Now, my mother was a force of nature. She was wonderful, as some people know who had a chance to meet her. But as time went on, and she was always the height of friendliness and kindness to clerks and anybody she met. But as time went on and she kept having these mini strokes, she got angrier and weirder and nastier and more needy, and I got panickier and panickier and panickier. I don't even know if that's a word, but it's the way I felt. And I began to feel really upset and scared and frightened that I was going to be reduced to taking care of this woman, changing her diapers maybe doing everything for her. And then one night, about 11 p.m., I was upstairs in my little living room upstairs, drowsing in front of the TV. I don't know if you ever do this. It's one of those moments when you go, come on, get up, go to bed. No, I don't want to do that. Come on, get up, go to bed. Not yet. So I'm drowsing, kind of falling asleep, and I hear her shouting from the bottom of the stairs, Diane! I don't even know if I can do the tone of voice. It was like she used to yell at me like I was 4. Diane! Come on down here, I need you! It was the worst tone of voice I had ever heard. It touched something deep in me, like I was a little kid and I had done something wrong. Like I had somehow been caught smashing everything in the house. I thought, okay, fine, I'll go downstairs. So I ran downstairs. What? There's something wrong with the faucet in the bathtub. The water won't turn off. That is almost a direct quote, word for word. I went, what? And I went into the bathroom, and I looked, the downstairs bathroom, and there was this little trickle of water. And I bent over, and she was perfectly physically capable at that time of bending over. And I tightened the faucet. And the water turned off. I said, Mom, all you had to do was tighten the faucet. Well, it wouldn't stop. Mom, all you had to do was tighten the faucet. It wouldn't stop. And I walked out of the bathroom, and she walked ahead of me. She went and sat in her living room, and I got madder and madder and madder and madder. She talked to me like I was a 4-year-old. She talked to me like I was a little kid. I'm not going to be her servant. This is the voice in my head. I'm talking to myself. Damn it. I can't live like this. I can't do this. She's sitting about 5 feet from me in her chair in her living room. And I stand in the doorway and I say, Mom, you can't talk to me like that. You can't talk to me like I'm your servant. Well, you weren't listening. Mom, I was just drowsing. You can't talk to me like that. Well, see, I had to shout. You weren't paying attention. I don't know what's wrong with you, she said. And I lost it. I'm telling you something that I am deeply ashamed of. I lost it. At that moment, I looked at my mother, who was about 5 feet tall then, getting thinner and thinner and thinner. Her skin was translucent. It was like thin parchment. I could have put my finger through it with a little bit of effort. And all I could see in my mind's eye at that moment was I wanted to hit her. It would feel so darn good if I hit her. I was sick of this. I wasn't going to be her servant. I wasn't going to be treated like that. And then it occurred to me, oh no, I'm going to really do it. I'm going to hit her. I wanted to hit her so bad. I'm going to do it. So I did this. Picked up my hand. Now, you also have to realize I studied karate for 6 years. I can hit pretty hard. I did what's called a side fist, iron fist. Picked up my hand, and a thought that went through my mind was, I can't hit her. I want to hit her. I can't hit her. I want to hit her. I can't hit her. Bam! And I hit the wall. Now, to this day, as ashamed as I am of losing my temper, I am really thrilled that I hit the wall. I hit the wall, and I looked up to see her turn white. And I turned around, and I ran upstairs to my bedroom, and I slammed the door shut, and I sat on my bed, and I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. What am I going to do? I thought. What am I going to do the next time I lose control? No one else lives in this house. There is no one to stop me. I could kill her. I could hurt her. I didn't want to do any of that, but I felt so out of control at that moment. I didn't know what to do. I was totally, completely at the end of my rope. We didn't have a lot of money. I'm a freelance writer. I make not a lot, enough to get by. She didn't have a lot of money, which is one reason why she was living with me. I couldn't hire someone to come in and take care of her. What was I going to do? So I fell on my knees like somebody out of a cliched old movie. And I put my hands up and I leaned against the bed. And I prayed. Oh my, what am I going to do? Even prayed to God then. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? How am I going to control myself? What are we going to do? Is she dying? Is she dying? And it hit me as I was on my knees. It hit me what I hadn't even thought of before, what I hadn't been able to admit to myself. It hit me that she was in the act of dying. I didn't know how soon she was going to die. It obviously wasn't going to happen that day or the next, but she was sliding down towards that. And it hit me then, in my act of surrender, in my act of prayer, of going, I have no clue, what do I do? It hit me. I was so mad because she was dying and I didn't want her to die. It still hurts. Almost 5 years later. And then I really began to pray because I knew what to pray for then. I had gone deep down and I knew what to pray. I said, may the act of her dying be easy. May it be easier for her and for me than either one of us imagined. May this be a moment of delight for us both. I don't have to know the way. I don't have to know how. I don't have to know what to do. May it happen. May it be real. May it be easy. May it be transformation for both of us. So it is. Amen. And guess what? Now, just before that conflict happened between us, about a month before, my mother had stopped painting. She had started basically sitting on the porch. That was her life. She had begun sitting on the porch, which I think may have been one reason why I was so upset, because this was not my mother. She always painted. I never told my mother that I prayed. I never told my mother about that prayer. And yet, from that moment on, everything changed. She began to paint again. In fact, she painted the day before she had her final stroke and died. I have her last painting at my house. I didn't really know what to do. And yet I got a bit calmer. And I said, okay, I started talking to everybody I could think of. What should I do? What should I do? Had friends who were social workers. What should I do? Oh, we'll try this and that. So we got more resources. My brother lives in northern Michigan. Why I had not really leaned on him for this, I don't know, because he was so far away. He couldn't come down. It's a 2-day drive. He couldn't come down and be in the house with us, so I started calling him. Okay, Mark, what do we do? This is what's going on. What do we do? And from that moment forth, things got easier. From that moment forth, our life became about her loving transition. Now, I am not going to tell you I never lost my temper again. I did. But I never again lost control. Never again. Now, in the last few months of her life, there was this amazing exhibit of Mexican art at the Nelson Atkins. Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera's, a few other people. My mother is a great lover of this art, Frida Kahlo, and she actually studied at the Art Institute in Detroit where they have a Rivera's mural. So she knew these artists very well. So we went to the Nelson Atkins. I got a wheelchair, which you can borrow from Visitor Center, and I pushed her all around. It was wonderful. She sat in that wheelchair, and I pushed her around. And we did what we haven't done in years, because we used to do this all the time when I was growing up. We'd talk art. Everything was art to be talked about. And I pushed her through that exhibit, and we talked about, and she was alive. She talked about every brush stroke. Look at the brush stroke there. Look at what Frida Kahlo's doing. Look at the depth of the paints. Look at the choice of color. Look at the composition. I loved it. And I was like, oh, yes, well, I like this and that. At the end, we decided we liked Frida Kahlo best. Yeah. It was wonderful. It was one of the best times of our lives. I don't know if I would have had that, if she would have had that if I hadn't prayed. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't prayed. And the interesting thing to me about that prayer is not only how much it helped us, and by the way, I would say a version of that prayer every day the rest of her life, because it helped. But the interesting thing to me about that prayer is I didn't have any answers in that prayer. I got only one answer. I did get one immediate answer. Oh my gosh, I realize I'm so mad because she's dying. But outside of that, as to what to do, there were no answers. I just opened my heart. And looking back on it now, I think this is a grace of God kind of thing. I don't know how I knew to do this. I opened my heart to the best a human being can be. I say this with humility, because I don't think I was in the driver's seat. I don't know. I opened my heart to how can we make this the best time in our lives? How can we go beyond what we think is possible? By definition, that prayer I couldn't answer the prayer because I didn't know it was possible. That to me is transformational prayer. We talk about affirmative prayer, and I love affirmative prayer. And I never heard of it till I came to Unity. And the definition from the Unity website of affirmative prayer is, they say, when most people think of prayer, they think of asking God for something. Not so in Unity. Unity uses affirmative prayer. Rather than begging or beseeching God, this method involves connecting with the Spirit of God within and asserting positive beliefs about the desired outcome. Yeah, that's kind of what I did. But I also think I'm a writer, I like to play with words. I like to think about transformative prayer, which is affirmative prayer on steroids. It's about aligning ourselves with the greater good. It's about aligning ourselves with a greater good than we can even imagine. That's what gets me about this. We can't imagine it, and yet we can align ourselves with it. What would this experience be if it was the best it could possibly be? What would this world be if there really was peace on earth? What would this nation be if there was justice? If there was really justice and respect and listening to women and all who have been hurt? What would this nation really be? We don't have to know the answer. We just have to ask the question and imagine it, transform ourselves into that this is true. I know we will get there. I don't have to know all these steps, but maybe at some point I'll know the next step. All I have to know is one step, one thing to do today. I think of transformative prayer as something like an engine tune-up. Pretty much everyone here has a car, right? Or has driven a car or been around a car. Well, you know you have to have a regular tune-up. because that aligns things, and it makes certain that the engine runs in its optimal way, that it has durability. If we engage in transformational prayer every day, we're engaging in a spiritual tune-up for ourselves, like I did every day, praying for me and my mother. John O'Donohue, a philosopher and Irish mystic, writes, "Prayer is the voice of longing. It reaches outwards and inwards to unearth our ancient belongings." Reaches inwards, like I did, to understand what I really needed, which was how can I deal with my mother's dying. And it reaches outwards. I have no idea how to do this. Help me. What do we do? And being open to help. I've recently discovered Tara Brach, who is a wonderful meditation teacher. She has a great podcast. And I can see you all. Everybody take a deep breath. Take another breath. Thank you. Tara Brach says, she posted this wonderful podcast in August of this year on prayer. And she's basically, her background is Buddhist, and Buddhists do pray. She says, when we're suffering in any way, it's because we've identified and are living in the sense of who you are that's smaller than the truth. You're believing some story about who you are that's keeping you separate, feeling flawed and apart from other people. Those are moments of suffering. In those moments, it is skillful and wise to reach out to a larger sense of what you belong to and who you are. The key point of what she says is that we are suffering because we have identified and are living with a sense of who we are that is smaller than who we actually are. I think a lot of you have heard Jay Pryor talk about the small self and the large self. I think a lot of us, particularly in the last few weeks, have been stuck in our small self. I know I have. There's a place of pain, of rage, a place that feels helpless. This is not who we are. And that is why I entitled this talk, Why Pray Now? Originally, I was just saying, Reverend Sean asked me, well, you need a title. Why pray? Okay, we did that. And then when I sent it to Kathy, I went, no, why pray now? Because now more than ever, we need to pray. We need to pray to get in touch with our understanding that we are larger, that we are of the divine, that we are divine, that we are powerful people. We are powerful people in our everyday lives. We are powerful people at our work, in our homes, in this greater nation, in the world. We need to reconnect with that. We need to feel that. Another Tara Brach quote. What is prayer? We are bringing ourselves into communion with the source, with a larger field that we feel cut off from. Some people might call larger source or field God or Jesus, or to an entity out there, or to the whole of your being, the loving awareness that is the whole universe, that the small self feels cut off from. That is a communing with that which we have been cut off from. Prayer is reaching out to our greater self. It is a reminder that we are more than the small self. It is an alignment with it. Now, we live in difficult times. I know in Unity, we like to always focus on the positive. And I do focus on the positive. I believe we are all powerful beyond our wildest imaginings. I mean, I changed the way my mother died, for God's sakes. I'm not that powerful, but I tapped into something. But to deny that we live in difficult times is to lie to ourselves and make ourselves crazy, particularly in times like the last few weeks. I think it's important in our prayers for us to honor our fears, to honor our anger, even maybe to honor our sense of helplessness sometimes. To know that these are real human emotions. Do you know how emotion works? Emotion, if you cut yourself off from feeling negative feelings, you cut yourself off from emotion. There is no feeling. We have kind of a giant on and off switch. You can't just feel happy. You have to feel everything. That's the way the emotions work. And to me, it also feels like I put myself down if I say, oh, everything's going to be fine. I shouldn't feel scared. It's all right to feel scared. What doesn't work, what isn't skillful, as the Buddhists and Tara Brach say, is to stay in the scared, to believe that the fear is all that is. And that's what the transformational prayer is about. We live in difficult times, but we also live in a grand opportunity, an amazing opportunity. Difficult times bring out, sometimes we feel like it only brings out the worst in people, but it also brings out the best. My goodness, I have seen things in the last few days that I never thought I'd see. There's a man who posted a column in the Washington Post who admitted to witnessing a rape in 1969. I never thought I'd ever see a man do that in print. He admitted his guilt and how it affected him. That actually is a step forward. Other people are speaking their truths. Voices are being heard in ways that they never were before. This is a moment of opportunity. It's a little scary, but it's a moment of opportunity. So now I want to end with a prayer that I actually did try and write this morning. It's a prayer for this moment. So let us bow our heads. Let us let go of the idea that we have to know exactly how everything works. We honor our fear. We honor our courage. We honor even our despair. We pray healing into our hearts, strength into our souls, beauty into this moment, and love, forever love, from above and below and from every side. The arms, the healing arms are holding us all and touching us in our hearts. Hands of love upon our hearts, gently rocking us, softly restoring us, forever knowing that we have all that we need, that we have the power, we have the support, we have the safety. We don't have to know how. We don't have to know when. We just have to know that our world, our houses, our cities, our nations, our world are healed, so deeply healed at this moment. At this very moment, it is happening. And so it is. Amen. Thank you.